Hey, thanks for tuning in. We are LivingFit, your trainer's trainer. We not only have education courses for trainers to upgrade their game, but we have full-on follow-along programs, workouts, exercise breakdowns, nutrition plans, and fitness equipment for you to reach your fitness goals. Now, enjoy the show. What's up, everybody? I have the incredible honor and great pleasure to be hosting Danny Lehr on the LivingFit Show. This man is a phenom of phenoms. Basically, anything he sets his mind to, which he might be able to give us a few pointers, but anything he sets his mind to, he achieves, and he achieves extraordinarily so. Masters champion in Olympic lifting. He owns the company Caffeine and Kilos. Maybe you've heard of it. Probably you've heard of it. He owns Excel Health and Fitness, which was a CrossFit gym, and now it's a wellness space that has a CrossFit gym in it and a few other things. And then he hosts the podcast Gas Station Cappuccino. Without further ado, Danny Lehr, thank you so much for hopping on the LivingFit Show. Appreciate
Aaron,
your time.
Yeah, man. Glad we could make it.
Yeah. Kind of a funny story. I'll give a little bit of context. So we meant to record this previously, and literally the power went out, and the power tends to run Wi-Fi at my brother's house. And I won't share any of the other gory details. Maybe it's a little bit personal, but we now have power, and we are now talking.
Good to go.
Danny, how did you get into the fitness space and into fitness?
I've always been interested in working out and fitness and that type of thing, and it started, playing sports as a kid, and just really a lot of outdoor activities. We would always go backpacking and all kinds of stuff, and then I started coaching wrestling when I was in college. And so that was like a big passion of mine. I really liked that and enjoyed that, and thought, okay, well, what job could I just leave at 2:00 to go to practice every day? And so I figured I should be a teacher. And so I was a PE major. And so I did that for a while. I was teaching PE, taught PE for 8 years. And during that time, I always knew I wanted to do something in business. And so I have this, this fitness background and education, and I'm teaching PE and coaching wrestling, and I had an opportunity, and then I found CrossFit actually, and had an opportunity then to buy into a CrossFit gym that had just started, right? Like the guy was, they were only operating like 3 days a week. He had just signed a lease on a building instead of out of his garage, all that type of stuff. And so that was my first kind of step into the, business entrepreneurial world of fitness, rather than just, and before that, the teaching PE and coaching wrestling, obviously was a big part of that. But then that once I got kind of in there, then from there, it just kind of, continued to go. And I ended up stopping teaching a little bit after that. And since then, just really haven't really looked back. Now I've different things, there are opportunities that come across, and one filter I always kind of run them through or look at is like, all right, like, does this somehow contribute to promoting a healthy, active lifestyle? And if it does, it seems like everything I've been a part of that does that has gone well. And then the one or two things that I've kind of done that maybe hasn't had that as a focus, or even that hasn't been a component of it, I should say, it's kind of hit or miss. Like sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. So anyway, I think that sticking to your passions or making sure that everything kind of aligns that way definitely helps.
Yeah, and I would say that you are definitely a mentor in the space of business. It's somebody who's trying to figure this business thing out should talk to. Any conversation that I've ever had with you in regards to business has always been profitable and highly productive for me, whether you intended it or not. But it seems like you're a pretty intentional person, so I'm guessing you did intend that. And I think Caffeine and Kilos might be the greatest example of that in terms of performance if you're trying to quantitatively, measure performance in business. Would I be wrong in assuming that?
Yeah, directly, like something that I directly like founded and have been a big part of growing myself as like as a big part of it, whatever. Then yes, I'd say Caffeine and Kilos is probably the biggest one of that. I do have a small ownership stake in another company that's bigger, like more revenue, more profit. But that's not something that I'm not like driving, or I'm not, in a major decision making role there. That's more just a minority ownership, and kind of every now and then, he'll reach out and we'll kind of talk about some things and whatever. I help out here and there with that, but so that's actually Max Effort Muscle. It's like a supplement company, and they're great. Corey G, if you're aware of who Corey G is, he was with Muscle Farm and in charge of the Arnold line there and all that. So he is the main owner and the operator over at Max Effort. And I mean, that guy's got more business experience than I do. And I mean, when you start a company and take it public, right, that's a whole nother level, right? So yeah, that's a lot of fun. I actually take that as a way to get mentored by him. He was looking for some people to pick up a few points in the company that wasn't just dumb money, but someone who people could help, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it was like it was a no-brainer, like a successful business, and also an opportunity to peek behind the curtain of someone else who's growing a business in the fitness space,
But I mean, that seems to me, from my bit of observation, like something that you just, that's important and you do, and that's surround yourself with people that are way smarter than you in whatever aspect that is, right? Whether it's lifting or business or whatnot, right?
Yeah, and you know what else though? It's not necessarily like they have to be so much more successful or smarter than I am. I prefer that. I don't know if that's true. Anyway, it's a different experience. I like being around people who are maybe at the next level, or the next 2 or 3 steps up the ladder that I'm trying to go on, right? But I'm also not afraid to talk to people that are newer or learning stuff, right? I'm actually I'm putting together. I have this group there's 3 guys that all run e-commerce companies within the fitness space, and I think that Caffeine and Kilos. Well, I know for sure we're larger than 2 of them. Another one, I'm not sure. I think we do more revenue, but I'm not totally positive. But even those, like I call those guys probably between once a week and once a month. I'll call each of them and just like, hey man, what's going on? Like what's like right now, what's working for you? What are you struggling with? Like what's up? Because I find that, they're talking about what's working for them. I might be like, oh shit, I didn't even think of that. Or maybe that exact idea doesn't work for us, but what version of that does? Right. Or even like, hey, have you thought about doing it this way? Like I find by helping other people kind of work through their ideas and what they're doing, that'll spark ideas in you and the different things, So anyway, I'm actually getting everyone together. All 4 of us, we're going to meet up a little later this year and just have like a little mini mastermind. But anyway, that came to mind when you're talking about that, because I think that like in theory or on paper, none of those guys don't have companies that are more profitable or larger than I do. However, I get so much out of talking to them and not just work through their problems. They also, I mean, these guys are smart, like they're doing it. They're coming up, and so I'll take advice from just about anybody, right? Or I'll listen to what anybody has to say, or just like brainstorm, right? But there's definitely value in having again a peek behind the curtain, or just the opportunity to talk to people who have been there, and if nothing else, and just from a frame, you look at it, and you might be looking at deals of a certain value, whatever, we'll say a $10,000 deal or something, and you talk to someone who's doing $10 million deals, that kind of changes your mindset, your frame, what's possible, Same
Absolutely.
thing in fitness, right? Like if you if the most you've ever seen somebody squat in person is 400 pounds, going around and hanging out with someone who squats 800 pounds is going to change what you think is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find that, obviously surrounding yourself with successful people, but then also just, surrounding yourself with people that have value, whether that is success from a numbers or quantifiable standpoint, do you feel like that helps you articulate where you're at, what your purpose is, what your sweet spot is, and how that works?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I just like talking to people. I think everybody has some value in one way or another. You'd be amazed, man. Like, start talking to someone who you think would have no like frame on what you're doing or whatever, and they might have some experience, or they say something or whatever. And I think that it's valuable talking to everybody, and just having conversations too. Like, I think if you go into it trying to be like, what am I going to get out of this person? Like, that's just a terrible way to live life, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you it's more of just, be nice and talk to people and see what's up, and like, things will just come up in conversations, or actually it's like, a question that I get asked by, I have some friends that are quite a bit more successful than myself, I guess you could say, from a number standpoint. And every time I talk to him, one of the things he says is, he's like, hey, because I see him like 3 or 4 times a year. He goes, hey, like, what's the most exciting thing you got going on right now? And every time he asks it, I pause for a second, and in back of my mind, I'm like, this is a silly question, dude. Like, I don't, but or just like, I don't know. Like, let me think about it,
Yeah.
And I know what he's doing. He's just trying to get me to be excited about something. And conversations always get better if someone's excited, or. And so, but I'll say every time it causes me to stop and think, and I'm like, well, actually, this is what's going on. And sometimes with kids, it's not even business, right?
Yeah.
Just whatever. And then that usually does lead down the path to, half the time it leads down the path to him either, giving me some advice, or half the time it leads to where he actually says, oh wait, hold on, did you just say, and like reframe it, like says, repeats a phrase that I said. Yeah. Like, yeah. He goes, man, I've had this idea. This actually just happened a couple months ago. It's like, I've had this idea I've been trying to like get across to my team, and I haven't been able to like find the words that like, but that's it, And the point is that it just started with him like legitimately wanting to know, like, what am I excited about? Like, what's going on? And that led to, he got something out of it. But again, that wasn't the goal. He just wanted to know, like, what's up? It's instead of being like, what's up? And you say nothing. And then you're just like there, right? You're like stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something special that happens when you come forward in an authentic fashion and you become a little bit vulnerable, and then that person reciprocates and does the same. There's magic in that, right? It can create true connection. And
the vulnerable thing is interesting too. This is a product of, you get this athletes, and you also get this in business of, like, what do you say, right? Someone's like, oh man, how's business going? Like, well, what? Of course, they're like, oh, it's good. Or you might be like, oh, we're working through some things, but we're getting there. Like, everybody's crushing it, right? Everybody's but that's not true. You get a bunch of business owners together, or you get a few guys one-on-one, you go, hey man, like, what's going on? And they're like, oh man, like, I just lost this employee, I'm trying to replace this guy and I can't, I just got screwed on this deal, like these, and it doesn't mean that their businesses are failing, but like, they will open up about what they're struggling with. And it's like, you get more out of that conversation, because then what happens is you're like, oh man, you know what? I'm actually going through the same thing. And then you realize, like, oh, like, everybody has these struggles, and that's actually reassuring. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm in this group of, it's actually like through an app on my phone. Like, I've only met in person, like, one guy in this group of, there's like 20 of us, like eight or nine, they're active, 20 total, where we, and they don't, some own businesses, some don't. Most do like CrossFit, but some don't. But everybody's just dudes, and most of us have kids, some don't. But it's kind of like daily struggles or wins, So someone will hop on in the morning and say like, oh dude, like, I didn't sleep at all last night. My 7-year-old daughter was just losing her shit. And like, this is what happened. And then also he's like, man, like, anyways, like, this is, this is what I did the night before, or how I reacted to it. And like, I'm not proud of that. Like, what do you guys do? How do you handle this? And it's funny because it's like vulnerable. Like, you think no one else deals with this, but then like every single person has a story. They're like, oh dude, trust me, my daughter's, in fact, she did it so bad, she was like literally pulling her hair out. And then you're like, oh shit, like, my situation wasn't even that, it's like something you would not tell, like you just wouldn't tell somebody about this like personal thing going on. But when you do, everybody knows what it's like. Everyone's got a story. Everyone, and you can learn from each other. And we do this thing called, instead of like CYA, we do CYO, which stands for call yourself out. And so if you do something you're not proud of, like you go on, you talk about it, actually. You're like, all right, dude, like instead of lying and covering my ass, I'm going to call myself out. Like my daughter was doing this and I should have, instead of like staying calm and like creating some space, I freaking lost it and like whatever, And anyway, but then it helps everyone because then you're thinking about it, you're like, oh, you know what? Like, I know what that's like. And, and then you like everybody learns from it, right? So you learn from everyone's experiences. And positive things too. You're like, hey, this, like, whatever, this person did this, my kid did this thing or whatever, or that's behind me in the drive-through, this guy's like honking at me and like there's a car in front of me, I can't go anywhere. Like I wanted to like flip this dude off or get out, but then I remembered this group and like some things we're talking about. I'm like, it's not about me. I should just do, whatever. And anyway, that like shared learnings, I think that's an underutilized thing, right? Like I've made a point to kind of seek out different groups where I can experience that. I think a lot of people don't have those conversations, don't have those like personal or revealing or honest conversations where you could realize like not only learn from other people, but also just realize like, dude, everybody's dealing with this shit,
Yeah. Well, and once you become accountable to that, it's like now you can own it and now you can actually do something about it. Whereas if it's in this ethereal, like it happened to me and so then I couldn't help, but it's like, well, then I guess you can't do anything about it.
I always, whatever. Like what stories are you telling yourself?
Yeah. Well, speaking of stories that you tell yourself and owning it, you owned that champion. I want to talk a little bit about just getting in over your head. Something that you said to me stuck with me because you were like, oh, I work out. What did you say? Like 3 times a week, an hour each time or whatever. Nothing crazy. But every year I'll choose something, or was it every year? Every year I'll choose something. That's like a little bit out of my league, a little bit over my head. And one of them was, you hiked to the top of Mount Baldy, or what was it?
Mount Whitney.
So Mount Whitney, which is way higher than Mount Baldy.
Mount Whitney's the highest peak in like whatever the continental U.S. or lower 48, whatever. Like Denali in Alaska is higher, but it's whatever it is, 14,000 feet or something. It's the highest peak in the U.S. basically.
Yeah, and it's not. If anybody is familiar with any sort of altitude problems that one could have, you experience those. Hike, right?
I mean, we got up and down. I didn't get any altitude sickness or anything, but we did it in one day. Like we got up and down. So it was like 23 miles round trip or something like that. But we started hiking at midnight, and then got up to the top around 10 a.m. or so, and then just like turned around and came back down. But yeah, that was fun because my neighbor likes doing that type of stuff, and I do too. Whatever, I used to do a lot when I was younger. I haven't in a long time. Like, and not even necessarily like that, just backpacking type stuff. And I was like, yeah, dude, I'm down. And then I just kind of forgot about it. Like I just had the date in my calendar, and like 2 weeks ahead of time, what are you gonna wear? It's supposed to be like highs of 24 degrees. I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna. I guess I got to figure that out. And then anyway, then we did it. Like we went, so I didn't do any, specific training or anything for it other than, we work out like 3 days a week, right? But that's kind of admirable. That's kind of the goal, right? Like now it sounds like a CrossFit commercial, but that's not the whole point. Is like just kind of be ready, like a general physical preparedness. And so that was a lot of fun. That was definitely interesting.
So did your training regimen change?
No.
Or what changed for the weightlifting competition?
So for the weightlifting competition, I changed for that. That was Masters World Cup. That kind of happened. I had a guy who's a friend of mine, and he does these Masters weightlifting competitions, nationals and World Cup and World Championships and all that. And he's like, hey, dude, like Masters World Cup's in San Diego, and like that's a. Tried to explain to him California, like it's not really that close to where I live, but
exactly. You're like, it's a really long state. Like
I
a
was like,
really long stay.
like a 10-hour drive, or a or a 1-hour flight, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so he's like, yeah, it's closer than Germany, and that's where it was last year. So I said, okay, I'll do it, and it was
Point taken.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, all right, I'll do it. We'll see. I hadn't done a weightlifting meet in 4 or 5 years, and I thought I did have like a little like monkey on my back. Like I had all these goals when I was competing in weightlifting. I wanted to like place top 10 in national championships, and I wanted to like place top 5, and I wanted to medal and all these things. And I never placed top 3. I never medaled. I got 5th. I did some things like that, but I never medaled. So I thought, well, this is a good chance. If I win World Cup, then Masters World Cup, then that can take the place of like getting a medal at nationals, and I can sleep better at night. So so there was like 20 weeks out, and so like 20 weeks out, so I had to get a qualifying total. So I did a like 8-week. There was a local meet 8 weeks out, so I did like a little 8-week block, and then did the qualifying meet, got my qualifying total, and then did a 12-week block, and then went to San Diego and competed in the Masters World Cup. And anyway, so that was a good time. And then but I also learned that I didn't want to compete in weightlifting anymore. Like it was so that during the meet, I had a great time. I had so much fun. I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing more of these,
Yeah.
And then I was, I got off the podium after getting my medal, went in the bathroom, changed my clothes, and got an Uber to the airport and flew home that night. And I remember like in the airport waiting for my flight, and kind of coming down a little bit. And I was like, well, yeah, that's that. That's it went from like, oh, I'm gonna do these all the time, to like, no, actually, like now that I'm kind of, the endorphins have left a little more, because the simple fact was those 20 weeks of training for it, I didn't really enjoy. I maybe enjoyed 4 training sessions out of those 20 weeks, right? It's just it's like there's a different seasons of life, right? Like people say. And if I'm training for something like that specifically, it's like I'm not going to miss a single training session. I'm not going to miss, like everything's got to fit. And at this point in my life with, young kids and stuff, and a couple businesses, I don't want to be in my garage doing squats at 9:30 at night because I didn't have time earlier in the day. Right. And so, anyway, but yeah, that was an experience for sure.
Yeah. That was my, I achieved master of sport in all 3 lifts for kettlebell sport. And it was the same thing. Like my shoulder was wrecked, and I didn't enjoy any of the training cycles leading up to any of the competitions that whole year. It was the same thing. But what I learned was consistency is what wins. It wasn't enjoying it. A lot of people think, it has to be a great training session in order for you to achieve some sort of milestone or whatever. But then I was like, this is dumb. I want to spend time with my family. When I have time off, I don't want to get up at 3 a.m. to go lift and then run a business all day. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And when there's a time where it's great, right? Like that's all that matters. And it's or that, if that does take priority over something else, that's okay, because you're choosing for that to be the case, right? And then there's a point in life where that's not what the goal is,
Right.
And anyway, that was, but I'm glad I did it. It was fun. I can not only say
that in the competition, it seemed like you were exactly where you needed to be, like tapering wise and performance wise. I mean, like from what I could tell, outsider looking in, I was like, dude, this is all clean. Like this is couldn't get more perfect.
It felt really good. And I've done, I had done whatever 24 or 26 weightlifting meets before that, and like I said, it'd been a few years since I did a big competition, but I had done, I competed at nationals and the American Open and stuff like that, 4 or 5 times each. So I had lots of time on a relatively big stage, and I've done the travel thing before, traveled around just to lift in these meets, and like those are all the things that, outside of training, like kind of intangibles that make a difference. And so I definitely had like a little bit of a leg up there, a little bit of that was a benefit for sure. Also in training, I had this, when I was training, like I just want to win, because I felt like I was pretty sure I saw the kind of the list of the guys that were registered for it, and I kind of looked at what the winning numbers were the previous, year or two, and I knew, okay, if I just go and lift good enough, then I should, I think I can win. So I said, well, that's not, if I train with that mindset that I just need to be like good enough, or at like 80%, then that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to be. Right. So I said, all right, fuck that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a total to where I would win the weight class heavier also. So like that was the goal. And that was my mindset in training. The entire time I trained, I did not train to win my weight class. I trained to beat the guys in the weight class above me as well. And I think that definitely helped, definitely made a difference, because you just train with a different level. Yeah, you reframe it, right?
Yeah.
I didn't. I would have got at the end of the day, I would have got third though. I would have got third place for the weight class heavier, right?
That's good enough.
But yeah, I really wanted to get the anyway. I do feel kind of funny about that, because for 20 weeks leading up to it, that's what I was telling myself.
That's where your head, right? Yeah, for sure.
That's where my head was at. It's like the 4-minute mile type thing, right? Like nobody can run a 4-minute mile. Then someone does, all of a sudden everyone says, "Oh, this is possible," and then it's a commonplace thing, right? And so that's how it goes. There's this book called Elite Minds by Stan Beecham. It's really good. But he talked about this thing specifically, and was talking about I just read this book, whatever, in the last year, but I never even put these two things together before. But he's talking about working with a sprinter. And she was like, oh yeah, like top 10 in the world, anyway, whatever. But she'd go to world championships, she'd be like 10. Like she would like underperform every time. She goes to the Olympics and then like ships the bed. And he's like, well, what was your goal? She's like, well, I want to go to the Olympics. I'm just happy to be here, and this is whatever. And then he's like, okay, well, do you think that, you could do better? And she's like, anyway, it's again, this whole conversation about training with, what's the difference between training with just the goal qualifying for the Olympics and going there, which is a lot of people, or, with the goal of actually winning, right? So like, how many of these girls do you really think, how many of these girls do you think they're going to win? Like believe they're going to win? And she's like, well, I think like these 3 or 4 girls believe that they're going to win. He's like, all right, outside of those 3 or 4 girls, like how many other people in the field do you really think are better than you? She's like, well, none. He's like, right. So like, why didn't you get 4th or 5th? And so basically then she goes into training before the next world championships with the mindset of she was training like she was going to win, training with the goal of winning instead of training with the goal of getting there. And she ended up getting like 3rd or something, right? So it's not like she like won it all. But
that's a big difference between 10th and 3rd.
Between 10th and 3rd.
That's huge.
Right.
Yeah.
And she ran a PR at the big meet, right? And so there's like these, and it's true. If you go, what do you think the training is? If you go into training every day with the goal of getting 10th, or if you go into training every day with the goal of winning, the intensity of your training will be different, if you have the expectation of winning.
Yeah. So if I were listening to this, I'm like, man, this guy Danny, not only is he sexy, but he also sounds like he knows what the heck he's talking about. Do you have, if I go to DannyLehr.com, is there a way to connect with you and to learn with you, or do you have anything like that going on?
Man, kind of. You can go there. You can fill out a contact form if you want to talk to me, because I'm sure that'd be fun. That'd be great. We'd work something out. For a while I was doing this email all the time. It was called like Danny Lehr Unfiltered, because sometimes I have some ideas or things or the way I phrase things may not always be totally kosher. And so there's so I thought, well, if I write this email that you have to subscribe to get, then I could probably just say whatever you want, because if I get out front and say that it's going to be, whatever, they're going to say things that embarrass my mother or whatever. You still sign up for it. Like, you can't really complain that I'm on the board of directors at my church or something, can you? So that was kind of how that came up. Now, the truth is I haven't been very consistent in writing those, but if you sign up, we get at least a few of them. And they're great, but at some point I'm going to pick them up again. And there's definitely a book in there that's mostly written, just needs to be put together.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're interested in that, if you go to DannyLehr.com, or if you go to DannyLehr.com/unfiltered, that'll take you straight to the sign up page for that. If you sign up for that, you'll get 1 or 2 emails through there. And if you reply to any of those, they go straight to me.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Love that. Do you know Rick Alexander by chance?
No.
So he has a process. You know Angelo Cisco though?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So Angelo Cisco he hasn't published it yet, which is interesting because they finished a book. So, but Rick Alexander basically has this process by which he, walks somebody through writing a book. And it's interesting that you said like, oh, there's a book in there. I have the same thing. I'm like, oh, there's a book in there. But it's like, I want somebody who's actually written a couple of books and has some of that understanding to like help me walk. And so Rick Alexander, I've now pulled the trigger. I'm like, no, I'm just going to pay you the half now, and we're gonna walk this thing out.
That's awesome.
If you're interested, you go check them out.
Yeah.
I'll connect you. I'd love
definitely. I'm sure before it's all said and done, I'll write a few. There's those emails again. Those are all. I mean, it's all really good, interesting stuff. And I spent some time. How that kind of came about too is I like to be trying to get better at different things, and I go down a rabbit hole sometimes. And anyway, a couple of years ago, I said, I just need to be a better writer. I just want to be better at writing. And so I read like 8 books in a row on writing, and from all the way from like sales copy all the way to like novels and play like how to write screenplays and all these different stuff, right? And just general kind of books about writing. And so then as I was doing that, I'm like, well, I want to start practicing this stuff. Like, you're learning all this stuff and reading these things. And it's like, if you want to stick, you got to get to work. And so I was like, well, I'll write these emails. It'll be a great opportunity for me to practice my writing skills and kind of improve them. And nothing against having a ghostwriter per book. In fact, I'll probably do that at some point too. But I thought, it'll be good just to write these emails. And as I was writing them, they start piling up, and all of a sudden I'm 50, 60 of these things in. And I did them for almost a year. I think I did about 50. And so I said, well, okay. These, if we just put these in order, group these up by theme, that's done.
Right. Yeah.
And then I have one more. Yeah, exactly. I have one more book that I've written the entire outline of. If you want to talk about getting weird, maybe I lose all credibility here, but I was in a sauna. I was doing these breathing drills in a sauna, and then guys, boom, like it hit me like all at once. It was like an outline for this book on leadership. And anyway, I got out of the sauna and immediately just started writing it down and typed it all out. So I have like a whole notepad full of like an entire outline of another book that I'll write at some point too. Yeah.
So how do you find time for your family in all this?
Well, so that's why I haven't written these, right? Like that's part of that. I have a few schedule things that I do that are relatively non-negotiable, right? So I get up relatively early and I work for a little bit before my kids are up, so I work from 5:30 or so till about 7 when they get up. And during that hour and a half, I get, the kind of biggest rocks out of the way, the most important stuff done. Then kids get up and I help them get ready for school and take them to school and stuff like that. And I work some more. And then every night I'm home at dinner time, right? Like we eat dinner at 5 early, and I'm there every day. I'm home at 5:15 or before. And then, from that until when the kids are in bed, like that's time for the family. And that's what happens during that time. And so you just you set these boundaries, right? It's something, Craig Valentine, actually, I learned from him a lot, is people schedule their days too often. And they try and schedule their family around work. He's like, that's no way to really do it, right? Like what you need to do is block off the time for your family and your personal stuff, and then schedule work around that. And so, people think, oh, it sounds impossible or whatever. It's like, no, it's what's the priority, what's important. So if you think it's important to be home with your family, then you pick the time. I'm not telling you have to eat dinner at 5:15. You don't have to, the early bird special, whatever. But you pick the time that you're going to be home, and then you just do it. And like that becomes a priority. And so if I block, it's like, what if you had a meeting, an hour-long meeting at 11? Like, you would do that. So what's the difference? Just like block off the meeting at that time.
Yeah.
So that's really important to me, and something I think more people maybe should do, you know?
Oh, 100%. And so probably one of the greatest obstacles to that is urgency, right?
Right.
Things that are like vying for your attention, whether they're important or not, priorities or not, doesn't matter, irrelevant. It's urgent. Boom, it pops up. It's a fire. Whatever.
Right.
How do you handle those then?
Well, so what I do is, well, first of all, I make a list. So like how I do like to-do lists or whatever is I make a list every morning of just 5 things. And it's like, these are the 5 most important. If I only get these 5 things done, it's been a successful day, you know? And if I don't get even one of them done, then that day was a loss, right? And so you make that list at the beginning of the day, and then what happens is you get through those 5 things. And if something urgent comes up, you got to make a decision like, okay, is this so urgent that I need to stop this current thing I'm doing and do it? Or can it maybe go on tomorrow's list? Or maybe can I squeeze it in knowing I can get the other things done? You know? And so I think that's definitely something. And it's funny too, like, you know, oftentimes the things we think are urgent or we're worried about something urgent coming up or whatever, right? So it's like, you know, you walk home, you get home, you take your phone, you put it in another room when you stop for dinner, and you don't get it again until your kids are in bed. And it's funny, it's like this 2 or 3 hour block, and you go to get your phone, and you're like, oh man, what I missed, there's gonna be all this shit I gotta deal with. And you look at it, and there's like, the only notification is like a text from your mom, just got, you know, or whatever. There's nothing. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm not really that.
Dad pooped again today. It was great.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, one of your high school buddies with some, you know, yeah. So anyway, it's funny. So that's it. And then, you know, sometimes there is something, you know what? A lot of times if you actually ignore it for 2 hours or so, it's funny how things work themselves out, you know?
It is interesting.
You've got to understand too, a lot of times, like when I was teaching PE, one of my other like co-teachers or whatever, colleagues, that's the word, would say to kids sometimes, and sometimes it was appropriate and fine. Sometimes I was like, oh, it's not real nice. Anyway, but kids would be, you know, freaking out about something. And he's a high school kid. And he'd say, hey, look, your emergency is not my emergency. Right? Because like some kid would be like, oh, I gotta go. I get this book out of my locker, or I forgot to whatever, like give this book to, or whatever, something going on. I gotta go right. And he's like, dude, like, hold on, I'm in the middle of something right now. Like, I'll help you out just a minute. Like, no, I gotta go, you know, whatever. He's like, hey, dude, like, your emergency is not my emergency, right? Like, they're not bleeding. That's not like some, like, there's not, you know, there really isn't this massive emergency. Just they have something going on that is, you know. And I think that's a big part of that too, right? Like, you gotta understand, like, you know, you get back what you put out. Meaning, the more text you send, the more text you get. The more emails you send, the more emails you get. The quicker you reply to people, the quicker they expect you to reply to them. And you know, if you kind of have some space in there sometimes, and I'm not saying ignore people all the time. I'm just saying, like, if you're in dinner with your family.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
If the roof's on fire, you know, maybe you should like stop and do something different. But other than that, like, if you don't even know that something urgent came up, then it didn't, you know, you know, everything is not likely going to completely fail or crumble if you don't reply within 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's so many different instances of just reframing your perspective throughout this whole conversation. It's been great, actually, but just a bunch of different examples and a bunch of different ways to kind of reframe things. I love it.
And, you know, and obviously, like, you know, all this stuff are things that I've picked up because I did it wrong. You know what I mean? Like, or I did it a different way. Like, I was that exact situation. Every time I was with my kids at the park, and I'm on my phone. I feel guilty for not, you know, because I get a text or something, and they're like, oh, I get an email, and then I'm like, oh, I need to reply to this, and then whatever. Then, like, when I'm with my kids, I felt guilty for not like working. And I was working, and I feel guilty for not being with my kids. You know, like, whatever you're doing, you feel like you're not doing the right thing if you're not present with what you're doing. And I'm not perfect about it. In fact, you know, actually, need to be better about it. I was better at this, you know, a year or two ago than I am now. Not anymore. I'm going to make that correction.
Yeah.
But you know, it's one of those things where eventually you're like, well, like, what am I doing? Like, I can't live my life always like wishing that I was doing something else or feeling guilty for doing something else. And anyone that has kids, I'm sure has the experience of, you know, before, after dinner and before bedtime, whatever they're doing, maybe they're playing outside or whatever, and you're out there on your phone, kind of ignoring them. And then they go to bed, and then you're like, you put your phone down, and you're like, man, it kind of miss, like, I don't want to talk to my kids now, but now they're in bed, and you feel like the biggest piece of shit in the world. Yeah. And it's like, I just, you know, I don't like that. I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to live my life like that. Right.
Yeah.
And again, like I found that, or do these things differently because I've had that experience.
Yeah.
You know, I've done that. So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, so obviously we could talk a ton more about whether it's the business stuff. We didn't even jump into the CrossFit realm, which you spent so much time in and had a lot of successes in. And there's a ton of other things that we could talk about. But I love that we finished on the family note. I wanted to make sure, because I know that obviously you're an intentional person, intentional in business, intentional in fitness, intentional in with your family. So I want to hear this intentional person's take on what is LivingFit, and obviously not the brand, but just this concept. What is LivingFit to you?
I mean, I think LivingFit is really just the awareness of how things make, or how you feel and how things make you feel, right? You know, to expand on that briefly, like anything, nothing I do too brief, but you know, for example, if I'm feeling stressed out, right, I just realize I'm short, or like every little thing is like irritating me. Well, I probably need to probably need to break a sweat. I need to go in the garage for 10 minutes and ride the Airdyne for 10 minutes. That's it. And then have to have this huge whatever. Or I need to just go run 1 mile, like something small and minor. And because then you'll realize, wait a minute, when's the last time I haven't worked out in 3 days? Well, no wonder, or whatever, right? Same thing with food. You might really want that donut, and sometimes eat it. Who cares? But sometimes you're like, you know what? If I eat that, I'm going to feel like dog shit later today, and it's not going to help me towards my goals, right? And so, to me, say was LivingFit. LivingFit is being aware of the choices you make and how they're going to impact your body and your health.
I love that. Yeah, just increasing that awareness. Again, more intentionality, right? And reframing it too. I love it. Well, Danny, thank you so much for hopping on the LivingFit Show. It was an honor, an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, share a little bit. And I know it was just the smallest little bit. We would love to have you on again. Again, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's always great talking to you, Aaron.
Great talking with you.
Hey, for more interviews like that, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, if you're looking for not only those interviews, but follow along programs, exercise breakdowns, workouts, nutrition plans, and fitness equipment for your fitness results, make sure you hop on to living.fit, become a member today, and I'll see you on the next one.